But then on Friday is it's a very, very harsh story to tell, because I went to Cuba on a boat to get my other relatives out in 1980. It used to be it was called the Mariel Boat Lift. And it experience was amazing, what happened there. Okay, so are we ready? Mm-hmm. Are you going to start?
Yeah, starting right now.
You already starting and you didn't tell me?
like 5 seconds.
Okay, but you cut it?
Yeah.
Okay. All right, good morning. I'm going to tell you the story of my life when I was in Cuba and how I ended up here in this country. I was born to a Cuban family, and my father was a businessman and my mother was a housekeeper. My father was involved in baseball. As a matter of fact, my father played baseball here in this country for the Washington Senators. So if you ever want to Google his name, I will give it to you and you'll see what he did. But anyway, I was 15 years old in 1959 when Castro took over in Cuba, January 1st, 1959. Actually, the whole country was very happy that this was happening, because when Castro came in, he really preached equality for everyone, and also that we needed to help the poor, the people in the countryside. I was so excited with his speeches. He was so good. Castro has a charisma. I cannot deny that. Like all big leaders in the world, they have this special charisma that move mountains. Okay? Hitler had charisma. Mussolini had charisma. The guy in the Jonesville massacre had charisma, moved people to follow them. So Castro was very intelligent and had charisma. I remember being 15 years old, maybe 16, when I told my father that I wanted to go to the mountains to teach how to read and write to the poor. I remember buying boots, because I was going to go with the people, go and teach the poor and all that. I was so excited. At that time, I was in a Catholic school. I started in this Catholic school when I was 3.5 years old. It was an all-girls school. And I spent my lifetime in that school. I adore my school, and I tell you why, because something happened at my school that really made my whole view of Castro and everything change my life. At that time, it was my father and my mother, my brother Edgar, who married in 1962 and had a baby. At the beginning, my father, my mother, my brother, my sister-in-law, and we were all for Castro. The only one that did not fall for his promises was my dad. My dad knew something was going wrong here. I was very close to my dad, and my brother to my mother. But anyway, I was really excited about the revolution. What happened in 1960, he began to take all the businesses from everyone. He kicked out all the American businesses. Sears was there, General Motors was there, big, I don't know if it was Walgreens, but it was a big store like that also. Well, anyway, all the big companies were taken from the Americans, and they started taking businesses from people. So if your dad was a decent person that made his money decently with a business, a store or whatever, everything was taken from people. Everything belonged to the country, to the government. You no longer owned your house. All the accounts, bank accounts, were frozen. it was not your money anymore. That was at the beginning. I started to realize something was wrong there. But my brother, who was also very involved with the revolution, became a militiaman. Everybody had to be involved somewhere. So he became a militiaman, and all the militia people had to do guard duty. Every block in your neighborhood was being watched by a militiaman 24 hours a day. No one could move. You said anything wrong? You were not taken to jail. You were taken out and shot in a firing squad. This is how bad it was. So my brother, who loved the revolution too, became a militiaman. And he was, let me see if I can remember all the things how it happened. The first thing that happened in 1961 was when Castro decided to kick every priest and nun out of Cuba. Not only stop religion, no, they were gathered like cattle and sent out of Cuba, priests and nuns. So all the Catholic schools were closed, all the churches were closed. My school, this is how it happened. I don't remember what day it was, but I know there was no school that day. 1961. Or prior to 61, because 61 is when they had them leave. But I know there was no school. But because I love my school so much, I spent days, even in the summer, there, helping paint, helping the nuns do this, so I was at school one morning. And we had 3 floors, central patio, and a door coming to school in the central patio. And there was a little old nun that I remember very well. She was the porter nun there. And I'm in the central patio doing something, and all of a sudden, I hear this door open to the school, and here comes the militiamen with guns marching in. And actually, I saw them pushing the old nun side, and I was like, "What's happening?" They wouldn't say anything to me. They would just march in. Then I saw that they were gathering all the nuns that were in first floor, second floor, and pushing them to the 3rd floor where was the cloister. The cloister is the area where nuns live that was sacred, was only for them. So they push all the nuns up to the 3rd floor. But the worst comes next. I'm trying to figure out what was happening. And so I rushed to the 2nd floor. And on the 2nd floor, we had this most beautiful chapel. If you have seen old churches where the altar, you have the Sacred Heart, Virgin Mary, and Joseph. Beautiful, ornamental church. That was where I did my first communion. That's where I did my confirmation. And I'm walking close to there. And I hear this horrible noise. And I run into the chapel. And these men were destroying the altar with hammers. I watched that when they were banging and destroying the whole altar. Well, you can tell that I haven't forgotten after 50 years. That's what made me say this is insane. So I went back home and I probably cried for days and days. Then I realized that they had kicked them out. The school was closed. I was a senior at that time. I was supposed to graduate that year. So I went home and I said to my mother, "We need to get out of here." My mother and my brother were still in favor. But so I went to my dad and I said, "We've got to get out of here." So here started what are we going to do? I was with my father. My brother was still a militiaman, and my mother and him believed in the revolution. I couldn't, but I witnessed. But as the story continues, my brother at that time was working as a teller at a bank, a local bank. And every month, this old man that I knew since I was a little kid, very respectable old man in our neighborhood, and he was rich, and every month he would go to the bank and he would take his money out for the month, what he needed. So on one day he went to Edgar, and good morning and all that, and at that time there was no computers, there were no, let me go into this account, there were ledgers. Okay, so everything was kept on a ledger. So my brother said hello and he took the ledger out and opened the ledger, and he looked at this old man and he said, I'll be back right now. So he turned around, went to the back and called the manager and said, what is this? He said, all the accounts have been frozen. I said, what do you mean frozen? He says, he's only allowed to take $100 a month out. My brother was in shock. I said, what? This is his money. This is a decent man that had made this money nice. He didn't steal it from anyone. And he comes every month to get it. You mean to tell me that's not his money anymore? Nope, $100 a month. So imagine what my brother went to tell this man, that he could only take $100, but I don't know what happened there, but I know the story because when I was at home that afternoon, I was walking the hallway and I hear my brother say, they were inside my parents' bedroom, and I was walking the hallway and I hear my brother say to my dad, we got to get out of here. I said, oh my God, this is a miracle. What happened, you know? So anyway, so that was the beginning of our planning to get out of there. Well, 2 weeks after, or right after that, my brother refused to be a militiaman and do guard duty for the bank. Can you guess what happened? Can anybody guess what happened when he refused to do guard duty at the bank? He was put in jail. And the one that put him in jail was his closest friend who grew up together with him. He was also a militiaman. So the word gets to my father that Edgar is in jail. Edgar had befriended a captain of the revolution who really loved my brother. He was an older man and he was very good to my brother, and my father thought of him and said, you know, this is my only chance is to contact the captain and see if he can do anything for us. So captain came. I remember they went in a jeep to a captain with beer, you know, exactly what you see in the movies, and 2 or 3 of his bodyguards with big arms, and my father went with him, and they went to the station. As a matter of fact, the station was right next to my school. So they went to the station, and as soon as they came in, as soon as they got in the station, everybody, you know, is just the captain of the revolution, whatever. So he ordered my brother to be let free. Well, the person that put him in jail was there at that time. And when he went by, walking out with the captain and all this militiamen, he turned to my brother and said, don't you dare think that you're going to leave this country. Because if I hear that you're doing any paperwork, I will have you shot. So now Edgar is out, we are at home. Now we're trying to figure out how are we going to do this? How are we going to leave Cuba without the government knowing that we're leaving? Well, at that time, so for you to be more shocked, if your family wanted to leave Cuba, you had to do many things for them to allow you to get out. Number 1, you had to tell the committee in your block that you were leaving. because they had to come to your house and do an inventory of whatever you had in your house. Inventory. Every little thing. How many lamps, how many refrigerators, how many beds. Inventory. Because the day that you were set to go, they would come to your home. If there was one missing thing, you would not be able to get out. Second, you had to go to the telephone company and tell them that you were leaving. And so they had a record that you were going to return, actually get the old phones out of the wall and take them to the telephone company, return them, and they would give you an exit that you had returned your phones. This is how insane it was. So how are we going to do that? And not this other guy here that we're doing that. So the only chance we had, the big man that gave the exit visas out, that did the list of passengers leaving on the next flight, lived 2 blocks from us. He was the same age, a little bit older than my brother, but we knew him for many years. So my father took a chance. He says, the only chance is for me to go personally and talk to him and tell him the story of what's happening, that we cannot do this in the proper way. So he went and talked to the man, and he told him, and he said, I've known you since you were a child. I need to get out because it's Edgar's who is at risk, and we need to get out. He agreed for my dad that he was going to help him, that he was going to call the family. I was going to call my father the night before we were to get on the plane, to be ready. And my father said, yeah, but how are we going to, all the paperwork, don't worry about it. Then your names, the people that are leaving, will be on the manifesto of that flight. You be ready for the next day. And second, my father had imported a brand new Chrysler into Havana. And he said, Mr. Acosta, and the other thing is, the day that you leave, I want you to leave your car in the parking lot at the airport with the keys in the ignition. That was his payback. And my father said, fine, we're leaving anyway. So my father comes home and tells me and my brother and all that, we're leaving, we got to get ready. And I said, okay, I'm so excited. I says, but I'm taking my dogs with me. I had 3 mutts. I always rescue dogs. And these mutts were so mixed that you didn't even know what breed they were, okay? Really bad mutts. My father says to me, Grace, your dogs cannot go with us. I said, I'm not leaving. I was 18. I said, I'm not leaving without my dogs. And he looks at me, he says, Grace, in Miami, they didn't want old people. They didn't want children in renting houses. They didn't want pets in renting houses. It's going to be so hard for us. Dad, I'm not living without my dogs. So he looked at me and he loved me and he said, okay, if you want to be that hard-headed, you are going to do all the paperwork, you're going to pay for everything that needs to, and you take your dogs. He thought I was not going to do anything. Wrong. Every night I sold, it had to be at night. I had tennis rackets, I sold them. Had a ping pong table, I sold it. Everything that I had, sold, little by little. When I had enough money, I called a taxi, went to the vet who was doing all this work, and I said, okay, this is what's happening. I don't know when we're leaving. Oh my God, I don't know. These are the sizes of the dog. They had to build crates at that time because they didn't have airline crates in 1960s. So I said, how much? Don't ask me how much, but I remember I paid him. And he said, okay, I'll build the crates. I hope it's not anytime soon. And you bring them the night before your flight. I said, fine. So Paid him, went back home, told my dad that what I did. He didn't argue with me at all. And the day came for us to leave, and we were a nervous wreck. So we were my father, my mother, Edgar, his wife, the 6 months old. Clara was a girl that my parents raised, and me were 7. And so it would be very hard to leave from our garage at 4 or 5 in the morning, because the flight left at 8, without being noticed. So the night before, I went got a taxi, got my 3 dogs in the taxi, took them to the vet, left them there. I said, oh my God, I got to trust this man. What if tomorrow when I go there, they're not there? But I had no choice. So we went that night and decided, what are we going to do? How are we going to leave without letting people know that or noticing that we're leaving? So I and Clara, 2 of us, we were 7, went to my uncle's house to sleep that night. And there were 5 left that would fit in my dad's new car. So that was the night before. At 8 in the morning, at 5 in the morning, I hear, I'm not at my house anymore, okay? I hear that they had to open the garage door very, very slowly to make noise because it was dark. And they could not start the engine, because remember that in all cities, if you go to any old city in Europe or anything, houses are next to each other. So they had to push the car out of the garage slowly, and they pushed it maybe half block, and then they started the engine, and they left. Meanwhile, my uncle was taking me to the airport to be there early. Well, when I got there early, thank God, my 3 dogs were there. I saw the crates. I was the happiest person. So we go there. And we go to the big man. Remember, all these are militia men dressed in uniforms and all that. My dad goes there and says, we're the Acosta family. And they look at the manifesto. My father's name was Baldomero Acosta. But he was known by Merito Acosta. Okay? So what happened that our friend wrote in the manifesto, Merito Acosta. So when my father gave his passport said Baldomero. So the man said to my dad, you cannot go until this is cleared, that you're the same person. But look, you cannot go. So I turned to my dad, I said, if you're not leaving, I'm not leaving. I'm not leaving you behind. My father was 66 and died a year later, but had a heart problem. So I told him, I'm not leaving without you, Dad. So he begged me, and then the man said, please convince your daughter that it is easier for me to find a seat in the next flight, which it was at 4 o'clock, than 2. I will get you on our second flight as soon as we clear your name. So, tell you the story short, my father was left behind. I was devastated that I left. And we got to Miami, and I waited the whole day. We got to Miami, and we were only allowed 3 change of clothing, pants, shirt, skirt, blouse, whatever. 3 change of clothing, no jewelry, no money, nothing. We got to Miami. We had a cousin there that waited for us. I remember asking at the airport for a dime to make a phone call, to call my family and tell them we're here at the airport. They brought me back about 5 o'clock, and it was the time where airports did not have concourses, that you had the plane parked right on the tarmac, and people descended the stairs. And I remember being on the 2nd floor of the airport. Nowadays you don't see that, watching the people get off this plane. My father was like a heart problem, had white hair, and here comes the plane, and everybody's descending and descending and descending, and there's no dad anywhere. And I am crying my eyes out. I knew shouldn't have left him. I knew it. I shouldn't have left him. Finally, here comes the stewardess, and they are right at the door to descend, and I broke down. I said, I know it. I knew it. But then I see this white hair coming behind them. He was the last to come out of the plane. So do you imagine my emotions when I saw my dad finally in this country? And then he told me later at home why he descended last is because when the second plane came, he had already been given the okay to leave, so they boarded him first, and they put him at the end of the plane. That's why he was the last one coming out, and he could not walk. I mean, his heart was pretty bad. This was October 18th, 1962, when I came to this country as refugees. So when you hear about refugees coming to this country, please, there are some good ones and there are some bad ones. But after we came, as a matter of fact, if you look at the story, October 18th, 1962, the United States closed the exit, the visas out of Cuba on October 21st. So we made it by 3 days to come here. So yes, you guys do not understand what I went through, or we went through, because you are very blessed and lucky to be in this country. This is the greatest country in the world. And unless you go through something like this, you don't understand. And I tell you, when I was at St. Brendan High School teaching in the 1980s, I remember people asking me, do you think of Cuba? I said, no. I don't care what happens there. No, really, you're Cuban. Nah, I don't care. And one day I was coming home. I was coming from home to the school, and I don't know why, I put a radio station, a Spanish radio station. They were playing a song. They were playing a song about Cuba. And I sat in the parking lot. It's 1980s. I sat in the parking lot of St. Brendan High School, crying my eyes out. Crying my eyes out. Because your country is your country no matter how many years go by. So this is the story of me coming to this country, very happy. I have been very successful, thank God. I finished my high school in Virginia, in Ashland, Virginia. October 18th I came. October 31st, my father put me on a train to Richmond, Virginia, where my father was a widower. He had married the daughter of a baseball team owner in Kentucky years before he married my mother. She died when the three boys were young. So my oldest brother was a teacher at a high school in Ashland, Virginia. My second brother was a Methodist minister in Richmond, Virginia. And my other brother was in the Coast Guard. So my father put me on a train to Ashland, Virginia, Richmond, actually. October 31st. And he said, you're not staying in Miami. But I want to stay with you. Look how old you are, and I don't want to leave you. You're not staying in Miami, because in Miami, you're not going to learn English. So that he was very smart. So he says, you're going with your brother to Richmond. I was miserable the first 6 months, 5 months, December, 2 months. I was so homesick. I wanted to go back to Miami. I wanted to see my father, whatever. But I sticked around. I graduated from high school in Patrick Henry High School in Ashland, Virginia. And then I came back to Miami. And now that you're doing, college applications, I wonder how my dad did it. Because I got in Miami in June of 1963. And when I got there, He gives me with the good news that I had already been admitted to the University of Miami. I did not do any applications. So he must have known how to do it.